really good I chose that black on red color scheme, huh? Wow, that's really light. Anyway, I'm Aaron Hockley. I live up in the Portland area. I actually live across the river in Vancouver. It's like a whole other state up there. And I'm a photographer, I'm a blogger, I do a little bit of software development, have worked with several of the different social media and tech events in the Portland area. And I was excited when Vin asked me to come down here and talk a little bit to your first Salem Tribe meeting, because social media is really popular, really hot right now. Everybody out there, there's a lot of people calling themselves social media experts. And I don't know if you know who Marshall Kirkpatrick is. He's one of the lead writers for Read Write Web, which is one of the top tech blogs. He actually made a post this morning that this crowded field of all these so-called social media experts makes it really hard for the legitimate ones to gain any credibility. I liken it a lot to about the year 2000 or so, 2001, when everybody in the world became a web designer, because that's where the bubble was. And if you weren't making big money, you could go read a couple, learn HTML in 24 hours books, and everybody could become a web designer. And then the bubble burst, and what happened was the good designers are still web designers, but the people that didn't really know what they were doing moved on to other things. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now with social media, is that there's a whole lot of people out there that are calling themselves social media experts, and they've got all these great, get rich quick, get a zillion Twitter followers and a week plans that they're out there trying to sell. When really just building influence and trust naturally online isn't that hard. So what's interesting is that social media really is just about conversations. If you look at traditional marketing messages, it was all about blasting your message out to as big and as wide of an audience as possible. We look at newspaper advertisements or television that goes out to everybody, or the bulk mail that you get in your snail mail. And it's all a one-way mechanism. So traditional social media, non-social media marketing, you just blast your message out there and hope it sticks with the right people. Social media has empowered kind of the recipients of those messages to talk back in that conversation, whether we're talking about blogs that have comments, whether we're talking about a Twitter stream where you can reply, a Facebook post that you can comment on, leave your feedback with. Even video messages like YouTube lets you post a video response. So social media is about conversation. It's two-way. So the old way, if you can't tell really well, it's a woman with a bullhorn. The bullhorn is not a conversation. Traditional marketing is very much a one-way bullhorn, and you go out there and you yell your message at anybody who's going to listen. That doesn't really work well in social media. And if you take your traditional bullhorn message and just try to push it out over social media channels, you're going to find it's not real effective. If you treat Twitter just like it was a press release, or if you treat your blog just as a one-way outlet for you to spit out advertisements on, you're not going to be successful in social media, because social media involves that two-way aspect of the conversation. So it's kind of interesting. Tara Hunt, who is a speaker and author who talks a lot about community and social media, one of her kind of catchphrases, she talks about turning the bullhorn around. And instead of you sending your message out to everybody you want to get your message, is to turn that around and take in as much input as you can from all your customers, your clients, and whoever it is that you're trying to influence. So when you're out there trying to build up influence, build trust, whether it's for yourself just as a person, or whether it's for a brand or a service that you're offering, the important thing is to be yourself. Don't try and put on a fake face, because people will see through that. Be who you are. Think before you talk, because what does go out there will stick. The internet has a really great memory, and And if you tweet something, if you post it on a blog entry, throw it up on Facebook, it's going to go out there and it's going to get seen. And trying to undo that doesn't really work. So if you're going to be effective in social media, occasionally you're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. That's one of the big differences between traditional media and social media that a lot of like the hardcore PR, advertising, marketing people have a real problem with, is that traditional PR and marketing is all about controlling the message. What's the message that we're delivering with this advertising campaign, or what is it that we want people to capture as the key points of this advertisement? Whereas with social media, you don't have that control. You give a lot of that control away to the people that are going to see the message. That's okay. So be yourself when you're out there with social media, but don't be all about yourself. There's a lot of people that I see on Twitter or with a blog that are out there, and a lot of what they post out there could really just be summarized as, look at me! That's not real effective. So you want to be a participant in the social media communities that you're on. So, I'm a photographer, but I follow a ton of people on Twitter who aren't photographers. I follow people on Twitter that are just interesting to have conversations with, even though they're not at all photographers. I'm not actively trying to sell them photography services, but they find out that I'm a photographer. We build up these relationships online, and then when they might need a photographer, I may know and contact who is a photographer who they've established some sort of rapport with. So I'm, establishing a network. I'm building these relationships, even though I'm not out there selling myself constantly. Chris Brogan, who's a pretty big name in social media, talks a lot about, he likes to think of it kind of a 12-to-1 ratio, that when you're out there participating in social media, you should be talking about other people's stuff 12 times for every one time that you're talking about yourself. And he's been very successful at that. He's always out promoting other people's things. Hey, check out this cool link I just found. Or, hey, this guy wrote a really great blog post over here. Go check it out. So you don't want to be all about yourself. Nobody gets excited about somebody who's constantly doing anything that isn't self-promotion. The other thing that's interesting when you get out there and being yourself and being authentic is, and it's kind of interesting today, is the issue of disclosure and acknowledging your relationships with companies that may be paying you to say things about them. For years, we've read magazine articles and blog posts that have been written by people who are given a product to try out, and then, in theory, write a non-biased review about that product. But there's always that issue of, if I give you, a $1,000 camera to try, are you really being non-biased when you write that review, or are you being influenced by the gift? It's interesting. Today, the Federal Trade Commission basically revised some policy and regulations that bloggers now specifically are going to be required to disclose when there's any sort of material relationship with a product that they're talking about. So, if you're out there pimping your product because it's your product and that's what you're trying to sell, you need to be upfront about the fact that, hey, this is my thing. So that's something to think about when you're out there talking about transparency. This is another line I stole from Chris Brogan. Be helpful. One way that you're going to really establish influence and trust and reputation when you're out there participating in social media is to be helpful. If you're on Twitter and somebody asks a question that you know an answer to, help them out. If you can point them to a web link where maybe somebody else has answered the question, go for it. Hopefully, if you're producing social media content, like blog posts, you're also out there participating in other people's social media content. So, if you read a blog post and think, it's an interesting idea, I wonder, what about this other kind of related topic? Leave a comment on that blog post and give the feedback to that author. Be helpful where you can. People will remember that. They'll be like, oh, that's the question that Aaron answered.